Hey, it's Michelle, TangerineBliss. Today I'm going to talk about my miscarriages. I decided to split up this video into a couple of parts because otherwise it would be this insanely long video and you wouldn't know which part is the part that you're really wondering about. So today's video is about how I found out that I was actually miscarrying. Before I get started though, I think this might be a good time just to hit pause, grab a cup of tea and just settle in. So when I was pregnant with my first and second babies, who are now almost 7 and almost 5, things went pretty smoothly. I didn't ever have any bleeding during my pregnancy. I didn't have, scary cramping situations or anything like that. So by the time that I was pregnant with my third baby, I really just assumed everything was perfectly fine. And that's a good place to be mentally. And I hope that this video doesn't make you feel worried or have any unnecessary reason to feel worried. But I hope that this is encouraging to you and that you know you're not alone. Somebody else has gone through this. Chances are good that people you know have also gone through this and maybe they just have never told you about it. Unfortunately, it's not something that people talk about very often. But with my third baby, when I was pregnant, everything seemed fine. I had planned to have a home birth, just like I had with my girls. And the home birth midwife, she just basically wants you to have an appointment around like 11 weeks or something. Just check the heartbeat, get you in her system, and then start the appointments from there. And so everything seemed fine. I was sick. I had nausea just the same as my girls. I wasn't any different than I was with my other pregnancies. So I had no clue what was going on. I was so exhausted, and it was basically that whole first trimester and no indication whatsoever that I was going to miscarry that baby. Unfortunately, when I went to my midwife for that first appointment, we were visiting and talking, and just one of the first things that she does is she checks for the heartbeat, and that way she's not like taking your blood or doing all these other things that maybe you don't need to be having done. So I laid down on the little bed in her office, and she got just a little handheld fetal Doppler. It's very simple. If you go to an OBGYN, they will typically use something different at first, usually with like a transvaginal ultrasound, but just for a home birth midwife, it's like you don't do a lot of ultrasounds usually. So she's kind of just going over my belly. She's very calm and quiet, and I'm just like listening for that familiar sound. Almost sounds like a little train. And we didn't hear it, and she was very reassuring. Sorry, I'm gonna try to keep it together. She was very reassuring. She was like, don't worry, it could just be nothing. We can check again next week if you want, or if you'd like, I could schedule you for an ultrasound, and you could go get an ultrasound. That way, you can hear the baby's heartbeat then. And I'm a very optimistic person, so I was like, well, I'll just come back next week and we'll just try then. And if you are currently watching this video and you're in that limbo time, like, am I miscarrying? Is my baby doing okay? I do not know. It is like the longest wait ever. There's just an amount of time where you just don't know if it's a yes or if it's a no. You don't know what's going on. And that's where I was. And so that week, I just kept thinking about it over and over again, talking to my husband, like praying about it and worrying about it and crying about it and talking to my baby in my belly and just being like, I don't know what's going on. I love you. It's like you're just processing, like, is my baby okay, or has my baby already died and I don't even know. And so we decided to go ahead and keep waiting for that appointment to check the baby's heartbeat again. But when it was like in the middle of the next week, something came up. I think it was like an out of town trip or something. She had to cancel the appointment. And at that point I was like, maybe it was like a birth that came up or something. Sometimes home birth midwives, they just have to cancel and there's nobody else really like just to do your prenatal appointment. But it was like on the weekend and I couldn't even get into a different place for an ultrasound soon enough. And I was just like wondering and not knowing. I mean, basically, I was just like constantly wondering about it, constantly wishing I had just gone ahead and scheduled an ultrasound instead of waiting. So anyways, I went finally, like a week and a half later, I got an ultrasound. And when you don't go to an obstetrician, gynecologist office, if you go somewhere else, like the hospital for your ultrasound, they want you to talk to your care provider. Like they don't tell you right there what actually is going on. They'll say, okay, well, your midwife will call you and let you know the results. So of course I knew that already, having had an ultrasound there before. But when I went, I knew what a baby's heartbeat sounded like. I already knew that from having kids before. And the lady, the ultrasound tech, she's going over looking for the heartbeat, and there was no heartbeat. And my husband and I, we walked out of there, and we both knew exactly what was going on. And I just started crying, I'm just like walking to the car and I'm just crying because I knew, and I didn't need my midwife to call me and tell me that there was no heartbeat. It was really hard, and she called me like just a few minutes later, and I'm in the car and I was talking to her, and it's like I don't 100% remember what she said, but she talked a little bit about, she said she was sorry that I was going through this, and she talked about grief and that it was something that you couldn't go around, you just had to go through. And so I was just like thinking through all these thoughts, and before we went home, before we picked up our kids from a friend's house, we went by Starbucks, and I was like, well, I might as well get something out of this, So I got a Frappuccino. I was like drinking my Frappuccino and just thinking about like what in the world is going on. Like right now I'm carrying my baby, and my body doesn't even realize that I'm actually carrying a baby that's not alive anymore, and the placenta can still grow and the baby not be alive, and you can still have morning sickness and have a baby that's not alive anymore. And that was really difficult for me to think about, and it was, I don't know, the whole thing was just so awful, So by that point I was like 13 weeks pregnant, and she told me that the ultrasound tech said the baby measured around like 10 weeks maybe, so it had been a few weeks since my baby had passed away. And there's no like explanation. They don't tell you this is why it happened or anything like that. So In the next video, I'm going to talk about the process of deciding how to miscarry. And so that's kind of a difficult thing, because once you realize, okay, I'm miscarrying, and my body hasn't registered it yet, or maybe it has. I mean, you kind of have a couple of options, but rather than get into that in this video, I want to talk to you also about when I found out I was miscarrying my second baby. Well, the second baby that I miscarried, which was my 4th pregnancy. So after my 3rd pregnancy and my first miscarriage, we decided that we were going to try again. And I really just kept reassuring myself, this is okay. You know, the last thing was a fluke, whatever. And we were able to conceive again. I am thankful as far as silver lining, you know, there's certain things that you can be thankful for even when you have miscarried a child. And one thing that I was thankful for was the fact that I was able to conceive that child, even though I didn't get to keep my baby, you know. So that 4th pregnancy, I was pretty nervous, and I wasn't like connecting in my brain like, oh, I'm gonna get to keep this baby. But I also wasn't, I was really trying not to just constantly live in fear. And it started off the same as all my other pregnancies. I felt pretty normal. I didn't think that anything was awry. I mean, I felt fine. And fine, like I was having morning sickness and I was super exhausted, but that's usually a good sign that your body's pregnant and doing what it needs to be doing. But after my first experience of having a miscarriage, I decided to go straight to the obstetrician. I went to an OBGYN that I felt like I could trust based on some recommendations of friends. And I went early for an ultrasound that time. And that was a transvaginal ultrasound. It was around 9 or 10 weeks. I would have to look it up to be certain. But I got to see my baby's heartbeat, and that made me cry. I was honestly at the point when I went in for that ultrasound, I had gotten to a place of really doubting and really wondering and feeling almost like an intuition that maybe I was miscarrying again. And I actually, for the first time in any of my pregnancies, this is like TMI if you're not into this stuff, whatever. But I wiped and there was like a little tiny bit of blood. And that was different. And it sent my mind to back, you know, like wondering. Because some people can bleed and have a perfectly healthy baby, full-term baby. And so there's really no telling. I mean, if you just have like a little bit of spotting, that's not like anything to be really upset about. Like, you kind of just have to wait and see how things go. But I started really wondering, and when I went in for that ultrasound, I was honestly thinking that my baby was dead. I was really honestly thinking that. I was already upset walking in there. And so when I saw my baby's heartbeat, I cried. I was so overwhelmed. I was just like, my baby's alive. It's really weird if you think one thing and then it's not that. So we talked to the doctor afterwards, and I had told her my concerns with like the little bit of spotting, and I told her my concerns as it pertained to my previous pregnancy, which ended in miscarriage. And she said, well, it's up to you. We can check back in a week and do another ultrasound, or in 2 weeks, whatever you're comfortable with. So, I mean, like, there again, trying to be optimistic, not overly concerned. I decided to go in 2 weeks later. We made that appointment, and I had a little bit more spotting in between those appointments. But you guys, this is kind of like the weird part. I already knew in my body there was something going on, because that second appointment, at about 10 weeks pregnant, they didn't find the heartbeat. And they started off with like a little ultrasound machine, and we didn't hear anything. So she said, well, we can, go use the really good, nice machines. It's possible I'm just not hearing it. But at that point, I mean, I was talking to my husband. I'm like, so what do you think? I mean, is our baby alive? He's like, well, I think that's the concern right now. And so we'll find out. And there was no heartbeat. And it was weird because I didn't cry that time, but it was weird because it was like I already kind of knew that it was happening. And before we left, I asked the lady, I said, it was not the doctor, it was like the nurses coming in. I said, wait, they didn't tell me, when did it say that I probably miscarried? Like, when did the baby pass away? And the date that she gave me was before my last appointment. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense, because we had our last appointment 2 weeks ago and we heard the heartbeat. And she said, well, probably just a couple days after that then. How bizarre is that? So I'm not saying that's your situation. I'm not saying that's common. And I'm not even saying, sometimes you have that intuition. But I would rather have been wrong and there have been nothing going on. There was like one moment when I was leaving the appointment, and of course, like at this point, like just like my hopes and dreams, they're just like coming down, and I'm walking out, just like trying to keep it together, and this well-meaning nurse lady that works there, she's like, have a good weekend. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like that was just really the wrong thing to say at that moment. And yeah, if you're a healthcare provider listening, definitely watch what you say when people might be receiving really bad news. Take care would have been more appropriate given the circumstances. Take care. But anyways, so yeah, that was like ringing in my ears. I'm like walking to the car. I'm like, have a good weekend. Yeah, of course, that's what I'm about to do, as I just found out my baby's dead. Thanks. But sorry. Like I said, I'm really like trying not to make this overly emotional, because I know if you're watching this video, you might be going through the same things that I was going through. You might be wondering, you might be in that place like, I don't know if I'm miscarrying right now. And if that's what you're going through, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that you're in that position right now. It is not a fun place to be. And I hope that you can get sensitive, loving care providers, somebody who will listen to all of your questions, somebody who will hear you out if you're feeling like I caused this, or, it must have been something I did. It's not something you did. It's not something you caused. I'm really sorry that this is what you're going through right now. And if maybe you're just like watching this video and you're a loved one of somebody who's going through this, and if that's the case, thank you. Thank you so much, because we need to be able to understand what our loved ones are going through. If you have questions, please, you don't have to drop them in the comments here. Feel free to comment on this video. I would love to hear that this has been helpful or meaningful to you. But if you need to connect, or if you have questions for me, feel free to connect with me on Instagram. You can just send me a direct message. That's private. It's not like public all on this video, whatever. It's up to you. But it's at TangerineBliss Mama, which I'll put a link to. These things are horrible to go through, and I wouldn't wish for anyone else to go through that. But if you're still watching, this is obviously relevant to you, and you haven't already clicked over to my next video, I just want to take a minute, just really quick, and pray for you. If you're not comfortable with that, feel free to click to the next video already, but I just want to take this time because I feel like it's important. So, God, I just thank you for each person that you have watching this video. I believe that you're outside of time, and I can be praying for this person right now as I'm recording, and it can be meaningful to them and impactful to them as they're watching. I pray that you would comfort them, just give them just a sense of peace and a sense of your love, God, that even in this really dark moment, even in this really confusing time, that you would help them to know that they're not alone, and help them to know that you love them and that you'll take care of them no matter what, and that there are so many people who love them. And I pray that you would help them to feel connected and to feel supported even in this time. Amen. I'll see you next time.